Every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste, the therapist. Let's go.
Hi. Hi, y'all. Hi, beautiful people. So, hey, what's up, Roberto? I like how, thank you. I appreciate you, homie. Black Light, I appreciate you. So, if you're watching me on the replay, my name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. We're streaming on 3 different platforms. So sometimes I'll put up comments from different people. Hey, Missy. And so we're on Periscope, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. And if at any point there's content that you enjoy and you wanted to catch the guest that's on, you can watch it. I mean, you can actually listen to it on all podcasting platforms. Celeste the Therapist is the name of my podcast. So since this pandemic started and the quarantine started, I really wanted to bring content to people Monday through Friday, right? Because I think big. I don't know how to think small. And I wanted to bring content to people. So not just any content, I wanted to bring content from other people that are kind of providing resources or knowledge or education. I think it's important for us to educate ourselves around different areas of our lives. So this is our 3rd week. This is our 3rd week of coming on live with the guest. So before I bring on my guest, so I have Sean LeDree from Loop Investings. We're going to be talking about investings and investments and financial knowledge and kind of like everything that is surrounded that. I think around this time, a lot of people might be struggling or have questions around this area. So I had somebody on last week, and then today we're really going to be delving deeper into investment. But before we start, I always want to do this: is put up this crisis text line. So anxious about coronavirus, depressed, like whatever thing that you're struggling with and feeling like you don't have an outlet, text 741-741 and you will be connected to a crisis counselor. I think that's important to know. Sometimes when we're isolated and alone, those negative thoughts starts going in and we start feeling like there's no other options. And so I really want to encourage people to utilize that platform if they find themselves struggling. Hey, what's up, Wes? So that line, and then for my people that are listening to me around the world where 741-741 doesn't work, there's this other organization, Hope for the Day. It's a nonprofit organization that was created by somebody who had lost 9 people to suicide. So on this page, www.hftd.org, you can actually type in your country and get a list of providers or mental health services that are available. So really, really dope site. Should we write it down? If it's helpful for you, you can write it down. So I'm going to bring on my special guest. So, right now there are many things happening at one time. And as you know, I've been bringing on different people from different genres or areas of our lives. So one area is financial literacy and investments. I think I'm not as educated around that area. So I wanted to bring on a special guest, and I'm going to have him introduce himself to you guys. Why can't we see you? Let me see. Turn your video on. I have you on the stream, but your video's not on for some reason. Let me remove you, then add you. Oh, I think he's frozen. I'll be back. Okay, cool. How is my daughter's doing good, Wes. Thank you for asking. All right, he's gonna come back. So we're gonna have Sean LeDree. He is with Loop Investing. Okay, here he is. He's back. Yay! Can you introduce yourself? Hey. Can you introduce yourself to my people for me, please?
Absolutely. My name is Sean LeDree, and I founded Loop Investing because I sensed a real need in urban areas where there's a lack of financial choices. So one of the things that Celeste asked me, did I grow up in a household where we practice really good financial practices? I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. I actually grew up on the south side of Chicago in an area known affectionately as the Wild Hundreds, Roseland. And Roseland, anybody who knows Roseland, it's about 5 miles, has about close to, I want to say about almost between 30 to 40,000 inhabitants. And there's only one brick and mortar bank, but there are 4 payday loan facilities. There are 6 check cashing places, right?
And so that's a problem because
absolutely a problem. So I think about it in the same way that we try to tell people that they need to be healthy, right? And if you're living in a food desert, it's really hard to eat healthy and make healthy decisions if everything that you have is KFC, McDonald's, and Popeyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, how do you make something out of nothing? It's the same thing about financial education, wealth creation, right? How can you tell people that they need to actually start being better stewards of their finances if what you're giving them is the equivalent of junk food in terms of building wealth, right? You can't build wealth by going to a currency exchange and paying 3% to cash your check, right? You can't build wealth by getting a payday loan where they're charging you 400% interest, right? So, I mean, if you borrow $100, you're paying back, $500. And so what I have been very fortunate, very blessed to have gone to the University of Illinois for undergrad. I got my MBA from Duke. I've worked on Wall Street for over 12 years. And, one of the things that I was able to actually see is that, I love capitalism. Let me say this. I love capitalism. I love finance. I love the way things work. But, capitalism does not benefit all equally. And so what I founded Loop for was to try to find a vehicle that can service young men and women like myself, who are first-time college graduates, entrepreneurs, single moms, single dads, who literally are trying to figure out, like, hey, what should I be doing? And there's a lot that we're trying to tackle, but I think that there is a need out there.
Yeah, and so it sounds like growing up in the south side of Chicago, he said there was like paydays and check cashing places which charge a lot of interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I know you sounds like you went to college. Where did that switch come off where you said, like, this isn't right? Like, a lot of us aren't really educated around financial literacy. It sounds like you've worked in Wall Street. Right now, you understand it more than you ever understood it. So where did that switch start to take place for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, that switch really kind of took place in terms of actually working physically in New York City. I used to actually work on a trading desk, and, we would actually do these ridiculous trades where we're trading with institutional investors. If you ever heard of the name Vanguard or PIMCO, those are institutional investors because they are pretty much, trading for professional groups like teachers, policemen, things of that nature, right? And then there are other areas where literally their job is to find areas where they can invest in, whether that be neighborhoods, property, and really kind of be able to get some type of return on investment. The one thing that I started to notice, the switch for me, was that, you can work in that same building with other individuals, and you come under that same umbrella where we're all Bank of America employees. Mm-hmm. And then you have hardworking secretaries who are going back to the furthest part of the Bronx, the furthest part of Brooklyn. And they're working for an investment bank. And the only time they really get to actually transact with that bank or transact money is when they come into their job and deposit their check, pay bills. But when they go back to the areas of where they live, there are no banks. There's nobody to actually help them. And so for me, that's a disconnect, and it's a huge friction point. And for me, the question is, why? Can there be, is there something else? Is there another mechanism to actually help people with their day-to-day basic, banking needs, as well as helping people be on the road for financial freedom? And, for me, that was the light signal that, I saw, case in point, my mother-in-law, worked so many years in downtown Chicago. And, she actually would come back to the south side of Chicago, and the area she lived in, the nearest bank was like, 3-4 miles away. And so when there's a lack of actual brick and mortar banks in our communities, it's really hard to put us on a trajectory of where there's going to be not only individual wealth, but community wealth as well. And this is these things have always been in place well before the actual demise of individuals going into brick and mortar banks. But, the question being is that, can this be changed? And I think technology has definitely caught up in such a way that people want to be engaged. People want to actually say, hey, look, you know what? Lead me. I'm ready to actually take charge. And it's fascinating. So I think we're at a really interesting time, even in the midst of this pandemic.
One of the things you say, why is that the case? One of the things that come to mind is stigma around financial literacy. I know, even just thinking about when I was struggling with a lot of bills and things that needed to be paid, there was a lot of stigma within myself. It's not even like I'm giving this information to somebody else. It's where do I start? I don't know how to do this. Right. One, let's talk about the stigma that exists around not knowing about finances. And two, how do we change the narrative? Because it's not like we were brought up in spaces where we were able to learn about financial literacy. So I don't understand why it's even there, the stigma that's there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, so many times I have interacted with individuals who have good paying jobs, right? Who literally, may understand about their 401k and not to the detail of where they know, maximum allocation, they're getting the most bang for the buck, if you will, but at least they're saving towards their retirement. And that's when the breakdown happens, because there's this self stigma that we should actually know way more than we actually do. And I think that it comes from sort of, from individuals. And again, this is the individuals I'm talking to. Typically, they are the only Latina brother or sister in that environment. And so when you are working with coworkers who naturally have these things that they grew up in places and spaces, as you talked about, where these conversations were natural. These conversations happened over a dinner table, right?
Right.
When you're the first one to graduate from school, there was no home ec in college where they said, okay, this is what you should be doing your first paycheck. This is how much you should be saving. Here's a 40, 30 book on personal finances, right? And so that's the thing, is that, so many times we don't want to be caught unaware. And so from that standpoint, we will literally sit in silence and nod our heads and say, yep, I'm doing that. And then we're just like, I need help. There have been, I wish there was some way to actually look at the number of financial posts that have happened in the pandemic, because there has been a real increase in the number of people just posting I really wish I knew about stocks. I really wish I did this, right? And, the question being is what's the follow-up? What's the action item, right? And so for me, in order to actually get around that stigma is just to be honest. Nobody expects you to be a professional in everything. I think financial services is so interesting in the sense that when you go to a doctor, if I'm having mental issues, I'm going to go to Celeste. I'm going to say, Celeste, I'm feeling depressed and I need help. financial services is the only area where we actually need help, and we refuse to go to the source to get the help.
It's so
and
true.
And then it happens to this whole, well, I don't trust them. I want them people with my money. And it's just like, well, you haven't done such a good job with your money already. So let's try to do something else. Let's try to mix it up here. Let somebody else have a shot.
Wait, I never thought about that. If my teeth was hurting, I'm not going to be like, I'm going to thug it out. I'm going to just let my teeth hurt, But when it comes to the financial stuff, we don't even really think. We're like, nah, I don't know what they're going to do. Right. And I think old school, if we go back, we put our money under the mattress, right? And so I don't know if part of it has to do with that we weren't able to even be a part of banks, maybe that was part of it. And but I think now one of the things that Jessica on Facebook is saying, because it kind of leads me into my next question. She says, I just started into real tangible ways to get my finances in order. Was never taught by her parents. So what are some practical things? Because I think we can both acknowledge that there's an issue with us not really being informed around our finances, and we struggle because of it. What are some tangible, concrete resources or things that we can utilize to try to help us navigate this issue?
Absolutely. The first thing that I would say, and I'm so glad that Jessica talked about tangible, right? Money in of itself is just a construct. Money is something that we can't touch, we can't taste it or whatever. So until we actually make that transition to making money real in some tangible way, then you always are kind of caught in this, how are my finances, right? And it really depends on how the day, right? So if it's sunny outside, I feel good about my finances. If it's raining, well, I don't, not so much, right? But I've always believed that this is that, your finances should be revolve around two things. Number one, setting clear budgets, reasonable budgets, right? And so there's so many materials out there in terms of getting your budget in order. I'm not a financial guru in the sense that, I'm a Dave Ramsey or even Susie Orman, but there are things out there. You can just Google, how to set up a budget, right? And make sure that it's reasonable and something that you can do, something that's not outside the realm. I'm sorry, go ahead, Celeste.
No, I'll just say this in regards to the budget. So this year, last year, it's a thought that starts, right? And I knew I need to set a budget. This year, I actually sat down and started putting things, what I'm paying, what's coming out.
Yes.
I do these little things for my podcast, and this program I use is $10 a month. They were taking out $20 a month. And because I'm not looking at the stuff that's coming out, and even I think when we write it down, sometimes we'll realize, oh my gosh, I'm spending this much on coffee or on lunch every day. And I think writing it down can help make it clear and then help us get into a budget. Because I realize I have to actually write what I'm spending in order to create the budget.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I mean, you talked about accountability. Writing it down makes you accountable at that point. And so when you start talking about budgets, my budget may not work for you, but the bottom line is that in every budget, there needs to be really kind of three main components: figuring out how much are your needs, figuring your wants, and then more importantly, paying back yourself. And so, paying back yourself just basically means whatever you're earning, you have mandated that there's a certain portion that's going back into yourself, right? You're paying yourself, because when we retire, at that point, we're dependent on whatever we saved up to pay ourselves, right? At that point, there's no check coming from, Corporation ABC. It's, at that point, the checks are coming from Celeste. The checks are coming from Sean, right? And so, so that leads me to a really great point, Celeste, is that the difference between a dream and a goal is that a goal has a definitive date, has some frameworks behind it, right? You're accountable. A dream is just I'm going to have X, Y, Z. There's no definitive date. And so, I think what we need to do is like, we always definitely want to be hopeful. We want to be wishful and have positive thinking, but let's put some action behind it. Let's actually break out that pen and a piece of paper, and then let's actually start saying, okay, here's my goal. I want to stop spending $100 a week on coffee. I want to spend maybe $10 a week on coffee that I make myself, and then I want to stack that other 90.
So it sounds like in order to even kind of start this process, you're recommending for people to work on a budget.
Yes. The first thing is working on the budget. And I think the second and most important part is really having that idea of how much can you start saving now. So those individuals who literally are in the ability to save for their 401k, they should be doing that. They should be, meeting the match. And I know that in this environment, it's kind of sensitive, but these are kind of like table stakes. And so from that standpoint, these are things that, I wasn't taught. And so, so I'm not coming from like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. That's where the place that I always kind of come from. And, once you're able to actually figure out what you can start saving, in the sense that it's comfortable, in the sense that, you're not going to miss it. And I think you hit on a really important part, that once you start making that budget and you start saying, oh, I'm stacking away $20 a week at the end of, 4 weeks, now I got, $80, and you start multiplying that out, you are suddenly surprising yourself. And I think that's what you want to do. And then you can start, talking about next steps. But the first step is sitting down and actually being reasonable, being honest about your budget.
I want to talk about investments, because that's kind of what you started. But before, I just want to see if you know the answer to this question. Jessica wants to know, is it better to pay off my car early or use that account to build credit?
That's a good question. So I'm going to give the economic answer. It depends. So from the standpoint that if you are, case in point, I just bought a car. And here in California, they have simple interest as opposed to some complex compounding interest. So regardless of the term of my loan, I cannot pay more in that specific interest had I paid it off early or had, I extended it all the way to the duration. Okay. So if I have a low interest rate of, let's say, 4%, and I had the option of paying this car down in 2 years versus paying the car in 4 years, I mean, I can figure out what I want to do. But again, I never allow a loan like that on a car or something like that to go to always the end. But the bottom line is this: what are you going to use that money for? Right. Yeah. And so from that standpoint, if you have other credit card debts that have higher APRs, knock those out first. Right. And that's just kind of my approach, because it's practical. You want to knock out sort of like your higher interest rate debts, and then be able to kind of turn around and focus. So again, if your car has a very low interest rate and you have higher credit card debts that are outstanding, knock those out first and then focus in on your car.
No, that's good. Someone says, I think the financial equation goes like assets equals liabilities plus stockholders' equity.
That's correct. So when you think of it in a personal standpoint, a lot of times what we start doing in our own personal lives is that we never kind of build up that equity side of the ledger. We just kind of focus on the liabilities. And, to a certain degree, you might need to rob Peter to pay Paul. What do I mean by that, Sean? Like, you may need to renegotiate with current payments in order so you can pay yourself 10%, right? Bare minimum. Because if everything is going out the door and you're not stacking up, you're not investing, you're not saving, it can really start to wear on you. And the question then becomes, okay, why am I doing this? And so, I'm not a therapist, but, that wears on people. It's like, why would you need to get up in the morning? And that's the other thing too. I want to talk about goals and actual budgeting. It gives you something it makes you meaningful, right? I mean, working just for a check at the end of 2 weeks and not really having a purpose behind it, you start to wear yourself out. And so goals are not only ways to keep us accountable, they're aspirational. And so even though they're aspirational, let's be reasonable. Like, you're not saving up to buy the New York Yankees. You're saving up to go to a Yankee game.
Right.
or a Red Sox game in your case. But again, I think that when we start making that tangible switch to saying, okay, this is what I'm doing with my money. This is why I need to make. I need to have a better handle on it. Then that personal statement, that personal finance equation that you just showed, assets equal liabilities and equities, right? We all know what the liabilities are, but unless you're saving and investing yourself, there's no way to put equity into what you're doing.
No, that makes sense. The next thing I want to do is I want to talk about investing, because that's something that I hear a lot of people saying that the stocks are low. I want to invest, but what does that even mean? I said last week I took a class in civics, and maybe it was a couple of classes on stocks. And at the time I understood it, but that was over 20 years ago. So if you could talk a little bit about loop investing and why you started it, and give people some like tangible steps that they can take around investing.
Absolutely. So 2 things about loop and our origin. So I read this. I was reading this book put out by the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank, and the book is called For What It's Worth. Right. And basically what they talked about is this idea that of financial capability. So many times we hear about financial education. We're even talking about financial education. There's no lack of financial education. That's the reason why I said I'm not a financial guru. What there is a lack of is the ability to take financial education and financial, financial execution and put that together and get you financial capability. Because what they were able to discover is that for every individual who learned a brand new financial concept that this family might have been under the poverty line, they found a way to save an additional 10 to 15% of their income annually. And for anyone living close to the poverty line or below it, saving that much money takes discipline, and that's a miracle. Yeah. So for us who necessarily who've been fortunate not to live check to check, I mean, we should have that same ability to do so. And so the reason why we started Loop is to be able to have a place where we can educate people on their terms, and then give them the ability to start saving and investing. But more importantly, not in this kind of open total return perspective, but more based on goals. And so that's our angle, to allow individuals to come and say, hey, look, I'm trying to save for a down payment on a new house. I'm trying to create a safety net just for in situations like this, because we know that in challenging environments, when individuals are let go, the first thing that usually gets drained is their 401k, which is the biggest thing it's the worst thing that you can do, because it takes you so long to build that back up, and you're being taxed twice on that, right? So if you can actually save and create the safety net that can sustain you until you're able to get back on your feet without touching your 401k, that's awesome. And then so many times, I've heard stories and I've talked to people of where they've taken loans from their 401k and have been let go. Well, you only get 90 days to pay back the loan before it becomes permanent, right? Mm-hmm. And so from that standpoint, I think what we want to do is provide an environment that's safe enough for people to actually learn at their own pace, and to actually start investing and participating in ways that they understand and can follow. But that's our goal.
No, that's good. Thank you, Casey Traveler. Casey Traveler. This is important to kind of understand what is the difference between savings and investing? Because actually, that's a really dope question, Casey Traveler, because I'm thinking if I'm saving, I'm investing, but I guess it's 2 different things.
Now, Casey's probably going to kick my butt, but the difference between saving and investing, and I'm going to say something controversial towards the end, but the difference between savings is that typically when we're thinking about savings, we're either, as you said, and I think one of the viewers actually put it in the question, saying that we've never developed the ability to trust institutions, because that was never an option for us. So, and that's a whole nother conversation, right? But putting money under the mattresses, or going to the banks to save. And when you're saving, typically, let's say if I bank with Bank of America, if I open up a savings account at Bank of America, all it's allowing me to do is actually put money into that account, and Bank of America will give me some type of marginal interest rate on that. Let's say if I put $500 or $1,000 into that savings account, Bank of America might give me 0.005 on that return on that, right? And so savings literally is a way for the banks to increase their deposits, because now that becomes a liability. And what they do is they try to borrow at the very short end to make longer assets by approving mortgages, approving car loans, right? And what they're doing is basically they're capturing that spread from where they took your savings deposit and was able to create a mortgage. And so if the mortgage is if they're getting 30% on that mortgage and only paying you, 1%, well, they get to capture 29%. So that's how kind of savings works. When you're talking about investing, now you're talking about the ability to actually create a brokerage account where you can invest in things like the Dow Jones Index, where you can invest in things like bonds, you can invest in treasuries, right? You can actually do these things. Why? Because they give you a higher rate of return. And so typically the most basic assets that you can invest in are bonds, which is basically like an IOU, a bond. So for example, if I buy a bond in Celeste industry, so Celeste will sell me a bond for $1,000. I give her $1,000 cash. She agrees to pay me back my original $1,000 at the end of 5 years or 10 years. Plus, she's going to give me interest along the way. So if it's 10%, I'm going to get $1,100 over a 10-year period, right? And that's how a bond works. How equities work in the sense that you become a shareholder, right? And so however the company is doing, it's reflected in your actual stock. And some companies actually pay dividends, which you can actually use, and it's and you can reinvest it into the company, or you can take that dividend and pay and invest it somewhere else. So, there's a big difference between saving and investing. The controversial thing that I say, and it might get me in trouble, is that when you need to start taking control of your financial future, and you've never been afforded the opportunity to do so, savings literally is not a luxury that you have, because putting your money into a savings account and it earning nothing, that's not something that we can afford to do. There's FDIC insurance on your deposits. They're good up to a certain amount. I believe it's $125,000 per account. And then there's SIPC insurance for securities that are good up to $100,000 per account, right? So even if you're like, hey, look, I don't want to lose a lot of money, you can invest in treasuries and it gives you a higher rate of return than just putting it into a basic savings account.
So, okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that if we look at like savings and putting it into an actual bank account, we're not really getting much from it. But the reason why we haven't put it in bonds or any other thing that's even basic, trust, anything basic, is because probably we don't know, because I didn't realize like those were options. How does one, because I think it's important not to invest until you understand what's going on. But how does one understand? Because I don't want us to be caught in the middle of, I know I want to save more, I want to do this bond thing that Sean's talking about, but I really don't like where, because this could be planting a seed. Right now we're planting a seed for people. Like, what is some like actionable steps they can take to kind of learn? Because you're teaching, I'm learning something right now. Like, I'm getting my money out the savings account. I'm about to talk to somebody about a bond. So I need you to help us sister out.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, just kind of going back to what we talked about. You can Google the word budget, right? So, and they have worksheets that you can just print out, right? You can actually go on your laptop and you can actually just kind of go through the PDF, pull in the numbers, and or put it into, and if you're not old school like me, you can actually put it into your Excel file and make that real, right? And so every time you're changing something, then it's updating. The second thing is just that financial education. And so, like I said, so many times we get into the cycle of running in place where, we get the urgency like, hey, this might be a great time for me to invest. And then we start looking at the actual stock prices and we're just like, I ain't got that much money, so I'm not going to do anything. And maybe next time I'll do something. And case in point, if you would have had, and not everyone has this ability, but had you put $10,000 into the market, and when we say the market, we're usually talking about indexes, right? The Dow Jones Industrial Index is the composition of the top 30 stocks that really represent the heartbeat of America, right? So stocks like JP Morgan, McDonald's, Boeing, they are inside of that Dow Jones. And when we say the market is up or market is down, what we're really trying to say is, how's the health of the best American companies, right? But had you taken $10,000 at the end of 2009 and invested that in the market, right? By the end of 2018, your return would have been $42,000. And so it's not so much about you should be aiming to put in $10,000, put in whatever, you think you're comfortable with, but just knowing that these are options. And so how do you learn and feel more comfortable about things like stocks and equities and just basic things? There's a website that I love to go to, and I got an MBA and I still go to it. It's called Investopedia.com. And Investopedia, what I really love about it is that Investopedia is a free service. They do have some classes that they're charging now, but for the most part, the entire site is very good. And for those who are like me, who can't really pay attention and have short attention spans, they have actual videos that they'll walk through, very animated videos on how does a bond work. And there's a nice man comes with a very distinct voice who comes on and actually shows you how the mechanics of a bond. So those are ways to do that.
Ah, that's dope.
I think Khan Academy is still out there that actually will do that as well. And then here's the thing, starting to just, force yourself, if this is really interesting, go to yahoo.com, go to cnbc.com. These are like Yahoo Finance. These are free periodicals that you can read, and you can just start taking a look at certain stories. And then the last thing I would say about investing is this, for those of us who have really big issues with trust, it seems like we're willing to trust someone's opinion about a company that we may not have ever heard of, or another opportunity that we may not be skilled in. So many times I hear people talking about, I want to invest in real estate. And, investing in real estate is the worst thing that you can do, because you can wind up actually negative and paying money into that investment, right? So the one thing that I tell people all the time, it's very bland, but I kind of model it around Warren Buffett, who people would argue is the greatest investor ever. Buy things that you actually use. Buy stocks in corporations that you believe in, because you are the person who is going to first realize that, hey, the quality has gone down, so I really don't believe in this company anymore. Right? So if your closet, like for me, I used to be a sneakerhead, not so much, but I'm a big Nike guy. I grew up in Chicago. I love Jordan, right? And I actually love Jordans. So if I'm going to buy in an apparel stock, I'm not going to buy an Adidas because I'm not familiar with that story. I probably don't know exactly what they're doing. I would buy a Nike. If you're constantly, shopping at Walgreens or something like that. So take a look around your house, take a look at your recent receipts, wherever you're spending your money. That's probably the first place you want to start investing in, because you're already investing in them as a consumer standpoint, and you've already evaluated the products that they're putting out.
I want to get to Margaret's question, but before I get to her question, what is, because you threw out $10,000, and a lot of people don't have $10,000 to just throw into the market. What is a minimum amount that people can utilize? And I think it's important for us to kind of go to this website and kind of learn, but I'm just curious, from my curiosity, like, how much money would somebody need to be able to invest into the stock market?
Yeah, so there are platforms out there right now, such as Acorns and Stash, where you can invest as little as $5, right?
Okay.
You know, shameless promotion, we are working on something. And like I said, I won't get into sort of the differences, but if you want to invest right now and you want to take advantage of the downturn that we've seen in the market, you can go to Acorns and Stash and you can invest and set up an investment account with as little as $5. And I think that the bare minimum is that you're doing that per month, and then you can set up weekly or bi-weekly withdrawals. And then also too, they have the feature where you, as you mentioned at the very beginning, Celeste, where it's just rounding up. So you can actually, you know, for whatever purchases, it'll round up to the nearest dollar and put that change into your investment account.
It's called Acorn.
Acorns, Acorns, and then Dash is another one.
All right. I want to answer Margaret's question. Margaret's always in here. Hi, Margaret. I'm clueless with finances. I'm a teacher in Florida. I have a retirement plan, which is an investment plan based off the stock market. My retirement has dropped 22% as of recent. So I got with a trusted finance advisor, and he is getting a company to monitor my retirement investment plan right now. I feel like this is better than just letting it sit and drop. Do you agree with this logic?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Margaret, because a lot of individuals have retirement accounts and who have done the heavy lifting, which is to commit to having a portion of your paycheck go into this account. So kudos to you. The second thing is that, you know, we have these different choices with our retirement plans. You know, whoever actually is managing the plan, whether that's like a Vanguard or a Fidelity or whatever have you, you have certain options. And so typically what you'll have is, I always say this, is that every employee when they're investing in a retirement plan, there should be like a default life vision or default year. And basically what it says is that it's anticipating the year of your retirement, and it kind of, it basically will invest for you based upon whatever period you're in your life. So for example, the younger you are, the more risk you should be taking, because the theory is that you're going to live long enough. Should you have any losses in that in your investment account, you'll have more years to make it up. But as you get older and older, and as you're towards retirement, you should not be gambling or taking on much more risk than necessary. You should really start looking to actually put those into secure investments like bonds. The question specifically is that, hey, you know, my account is down 22%. You're in a good company, because there are a lot of people's accounts that are done by double digit just because of the environment we're in. I think the worst thing that you can possibly do at this point is to let fear and panic set in so much that you start to try to do things that you normally wouldn't do. And so from this standpoint is that we know that after 2008, after the Great Recession, that the market came back, right? The market will come back at this point. And the question is, you know, kind of going back to what we mentioned earlier, Celeste, in terms of knowing versus doing and executing. Like, we know we should buy low and sell high. We hear these things, but when you're looking at your statement, it becomes real, right? And so when you're looking like and saying, hey, I'm down 22%, it's harder to actually, you know, easier said than done. But the thing about it is that markets will come back, you know, regardless of the actual chaos that is Washington. There are so many factors that are at play. And I think that, you know, we will see the economic change that needs to come in order to actually get us back to where we were, if not better. So I think it's great you're working with an advisor, because you raised your hand and say, hey, I need help. And I think that at this point, all you can do is basically kind of, you know, exhibit patience. It will come back. History tells us that we go higher, and just, you know, if you have questions or whatever, you know, ask.
No, this is good. And what you're working on now is going to allow people to kind of learn about this stuff from the comfort of their own phone.
Yes. So it's really exciting because I
can see it in your face. Like, to my listeners that's listening to this on a podcast, you just got geeked right now.
So we are we're in the early stages of creating a chat bot that basically will ask these questions. So, being able to ask basic financial questions. And I think that's where a lot of us get stuck, and kind of going back to that kind of, running and stuck in position cycle, right? That, we have these, this great light bulb that goes off that I should be investing, I should be doing more. And then when we start asking people, okay, where should I be investing? Then we start hearing things like $10,000, $5,000. Apple's trading at $200 a share. Like, whoa. Like, look, I ain't trying to buy a house. I'm just trying to put my money in the stock market, right?
I'm hollering at Acorn if that $5 startup.
Right. And so what happens is that I've seen so many people who let that become a deterrent to wanting to just educate themselves. And then also too, if we're being really, really honest, some of the financial education material out there really just doesn't speak to us. And so, what we're really trying to aim for is an actual interface where people feel comfortable. I mean, like, you're texting all day long. And so if you're asking a chatbot a question, it's going to feel like you're talking to your best friend. So we're going to put it in plain layman's terms. What's a stock? What's a bond? And we want people to feel comfortable about what the decisions that they're making, because I think, unless all of us are moving in the direction forward in terms of building and saving wealth, regardless of if we quote unquote have made it or not, then we're all going to be pulled behind, because there's so many statistics out there that talk about the average net worth of African Americans and Latinos. And it's really shocking, right? And so, the first step is to be educated, be initiated in terms of what's going on. And then the second step is to act, right? And so that's what we're really excited about, creating a platform that will allow you to do all these things instead of kind of having these siloed functions where you got to pick and choose. Here we're trying to do one-stop shopping.
Yes. Well, I'm excited about the app. Once it's created, I'm going to have you back on, because there's so many questions. And I think, I've learned a lot just from hearing you speak about this right now. How could people follow you in the meantime?
Yes.
While this is happening, just because you're very knowledgeable, you was on point, like you was boom, boom, boom. You said what you knew, you said what you didn't know. And I love it. So how can people reach out and find you?
Absolutely. So we have a social media presence at Loop Investing for Facebook. Please, like and follow us. That's the best way to actually keep in contact with us as we're getting closer to actually launching. We have an IG page as well. And then also we're on Twitter. And I'll throw this out there. I am a registered investment advisor. I'm independent. I don't have anything to sell you, so I'm not selling anything right now. If you have a hard question, shoot me an email. I'm at sean@loopinvesting.com. And I'll tell you up front that, hey, I'll walk you through, some financial education pieces, but ultimately you'll make the decision, right? Because again, I'm not trying to be your advisor, but if you have a hard question and you need some help, please feel free to reach out, because I think so many times, there's just kind of this narrative in terms of being able to not only be a great employee, be a great teammate, and all these other things, and so many pressures where you have to be on it. And usually you're the only one of your kind in that environment. And then you're forced to be on it and be a professional in investing, right? And I think that's unfair. And so from that standpoint, I really believe that there's so many of us out there that can benefit from these services, and they should be readily available to anybody who's at that point.
Yes. Yeah, I'm grateful for you. This is awesome. It's people that have kind of gone through some things, and the things that they're passionate about. It speaks through the way you talk about it. So if you just heard Sean speak, you just came in here, you can listen to it on the replay, on the podcast replay, or catch this replay. But he did not grow up in investment and financial literacy. None of this stuff was something that came in his natural environment. And I say that because I just want people to know that just because we didn't know doesn't mean we can't learn. So I think it's important to understand the things that we're deficient in, or the things that we struggle in. Because once I can understand, okay, I'm struggling in this financial literacy stuff.
Right.
I think it's on me to educate myself about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many resources readily available. I'm going to list all of them in the show notes if you're listening to this on the podcast now, so that you can start clicking on them, because he just gave us some free 99 information. I'm gonna be on Acorn right after this. I'm about to be on Acorn to start my $5 investment. Sean, thank you so much. I appreciate you so much, homie. And then once this app is out, we're gonna be back to learn about it, because then I'm moving from Acorn to Loop Investing.
There you go. There you go.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, that was awesome. That was amazing. I'm grateful to Sean for coming on. Just downloaded Acorn. Jessica's on it, yo. Jessica is on it. Jessica, I'm about to be doing the same thing you just did. I'm about to do the same thing. I got $5. I ain't got 10,000, but I got $5 to do it. And then we're gonna move it over to Loop Investing and support my boy Sean. Yeah, that was awesome. I'm grateful to him for coming on. Thank you guys for being here. I'm not sure where you guys are checking in from. I see people from everywhere. Have you downloaded heard of Robinhood? Yes, Robinhood's a good one too. Thank you, Missy. I appreciate you. Robinhood is a good one. So I have heard of Robinhood. So if you just came in, I will follow you. If you just came in, my name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. I have a podcast called Celeste the Therapist Podcast. We're almost at 90,000 downloads. Amazing, right? And we're in 120 countries. Even more amazing. So I'm grateful to all of my loyal listeners in the house. Stash your Acorn, make it happen. Start small and it works. Casey Traveler, I see you know your stuff. You had some bomb questions. You're checking in from Atlanta. Hi, Atlanta. Thank you for being here. So this podcast, I started to do the podcast live Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we're talking about different things, because I knew that people are home, and I just thought about, how we can get stuck in our own thoughts. So I wanted to bring my podcast onto a live platform, and this is my third week doing it. And it's been really great. So this is, if you listen to my podcast, you already know this is kind of like the way my podcast already flows. Now I'm just bringing the audience into it. I'm beyond grateful for all of the support that you guys bring me. If you guys want to follow me on Instagram or social media, Celeste the Therapist is the way to follow me. That's my business social media. We just talk about mental health on there. This is my personal Instagram, where I kind of go through my day sometimes, and share my family or what I'm doing on that account. One of the things that I always say is that my goal is to help you shift the way you think. I think that's important, right? Think about today's show with Sean and how he kind of educated us about, or he didn't educate Miss Traveler. She was on it. She knows about the stuff. But a lot of us, like me and Jessica, educated us about some stuff. And I feel like it's allowing me to shift my thought process around finances. And so my goal with this podcast is to help people shift the way they think about different areas of their lives, so they don't have to feel stuck. So that's something that's important to me. So tomorrow, we'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with another guest. I actually have guests lined up for the entire month, so I'm excited about that. But if you want to be a guest on the show, if you feel like you have content that would be beneficial to the audience, message me, email me, info@celestetherapist.com. You can find all of my social media handles on celestetherapist.com. We'll be back 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you check out the podcast, follow me on social media, share this post, or share the podcast. That would be good. Sean is my B schoolmate. Okay. I'm glad. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, share this with somebody that you love. Follow my podcast. Follow me on social media. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.
Every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste, the therapist. Let's go.